So I'm here to talk about the invasion, as Frank said, on our southern border. There are just a few basic facts to give you before we get into what's actually going on. There are two primary groups coming from Central America, mostly from Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador. The first, which is what the media is covering, is the unaccompanied alien children, UACs. That means that they're supposedly under the age of 18. And the idea that they're actually unaccompanied is a complete falsehood, because they are, in fact, accompanied by cartel smugglers until they get to the U.S. border, and then they're all of a sudden let free from the smugglers, and they become unaccompanied children with all kinds of extra rights once they hit United States soil. The second group that's coming in that's not being covered as much is family units. And these are mostly one parent with children. A lot of times it's actually some random single woman or man who has chosen some children and said, tell them I'm your parent when we cross the border. There's no verification. First of all, there's no verification of anyone's identity unless they're actually carrying documents that can be verified, which is rare. There's no verification of anyone's age. There's no verification of anyone's nationality. So we know for sure that there are, for example, Mexicans coming across saying they're Central Americans, so that instead of getting immediately turned around, they get to go through this process of years here in the United States. So far, we've had over 42,000 family units apprehended this year. Only people over the age of 14 can be fingerprinted under U.S. law. So if you say you're under 14, you're not fingerprinted. Even if you are covered head to toe in MS-13 gang tattoos, you're not fingerprinted. So even if you did happen to have a criminal record in the United States, which is the only thing that matters, a criminal record in another country doesn't, you would still be admitted. As I said, parentage is not being verified. So, you know, there are also reports of, for example, single men paying children to say, this is my father, and coming in. And then, of course, surprisingly, the single men disappear from the processing centers or from the bus station where they're taken to be released. DHS has detention facilities right now to hold 96 family units. 96. 42,000 family units have been apprehended so far this year. So guess what? They're being given the notice to appear at a later court date, which is what they call the permisos. They're being taken to bus stations, and they're being given bus tickets to wherever they say they have a relative or a friend, or wherever they want to go. That's what's happening to the family units. They are not being medically screened or vaccinated, period. Any of them. The family units are being shipped off to bus stations around the country. Welcome to a neighborhood near you. The unaccompanied alien children, the UACs, so far over 52,000 have been apprehended this year. And in fact, most of them are not apprehended. They walk up to a Border Patrol officer or a sheriff or whatever law enforcement they find and turn themselves in. This 52,000 is up from 6,000 in 2011. Went to 24,000 last year. So this is a steady trajectory. I mean, it was a steep trajectory, but it has been steadily increasing. There is no question that the administration knew this was coming. The Health and Human Services budget released in early March asked for funding for 65,000 unaccompanied alien children. As we've seen in media reports, there was a request in January for escort services for unaccompanied minor children. And they need the escorts because the Department of Homeland Security is only allowed to hold them in detention facilities for 72 hours. After that, they have to be transported by ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, to HHS wherever HHS wants them to be taken, so that the Office of Refugee Resettlement then takes control over them and is then supposed to do medical screening. And what, by the way, the medical screening is a healthcare professional visually examining the aliens. If they have symptoms, they are then treated. If they don't have symptoms, they are vaccinated and sent off on their way with large groups of other children and other workers, so, you know, social services kinds of people from HHS, and they're put into communities across America. Or, and this is where it gets good, they're put onto military bases. So far we know for sure that 3 military bases, Lackland, Fort Sill, and Ventura Naval Base, are being used to warehouse essentially these illegal alien children. The military, rightfully so, demanded that the children be vaccinated and held for 7 days before being allowed onto a military base. That did not stop the first case of confirmed swine flu, H1N1, from being found in Lackland Air Force Base. That child has now been hospitalized. Thousands of doses of the, whatever the antibiotic, the vaccine is, have been sent to Lackland. But, I mean, that child clearly didn't show symptoms for some period of that 7 days, and yet had swine flu after he had been at Lackland. So the question is, are we exposing our soldiers to various diseases? And swine flu is not even the worst, not anywhere close to the worst. There is drug-resistant tuberculosis. There is MRSA staph infections, cholera, scabies is running rampant, lice, chickenpox. There are new outbreaks of chickenpox at various detention centers and holding centers, and 1 case of leprosy. This is, you know, there is more to come. I promise you, there is more to come, and these folks are not being properly or adequately screened, and they're being shipped around the country. But I think the real question that I have is, you know, some of the national security implications of this are obvious. I mean, are we exposing our soldiers to these various diseases? Because I guarantee you, the soldiers had to build the facilities where the children are being held on the bases. If there's a repair that needs to happen, I guarantee you some HHS social worker is not going to be doing it. It's going to be the soldiers. So there may be mostly separation, but it's not going to be total separation. The other thing is, of course, that military resources are being used for this process. But I think what's less obvious and what isn't being reported on is the actual tactics that are being used to get order. Because what's actually happening is that the family units and the children, minors, are being grouped into very large groups, up to 300 people, when they're on the Mexican side of the border. And then at a given signal, when they can visually see law enforcement or Border Patrol across the river, they're being sent across. As soon as the Border Patrol sees a large group, as say, you know, you're a Border Patrol agent, you see a large group coming at you, the first thing you do, you know they're coming right to you to turn themselves in, you call for reinforcements from the flanking sections of the border. So the Border Patrol comes in from the outer edges. At the same point that this agent is calling in reinforcements, the single men in the crowd start running. And they're in the U.S. and they're gone. And there's nothing this Border Patrol agent or 2 Border Patrol agents can do, because he's got 280, 300 people staring him in the face. So then the reinforcements get there, and they've just left the flanks wide open. So the cartels are using the outer edges to bring drugs, aliens, criminals, terrorists, who knows what, through. And then the Border Patrol has to call in more reinforcements to transport these large groups. So at the point when the transport starts, the border's wide open. Absolutely wide open. And the agents have testified to this. Every time a large group is encountered, which is more than every day, more than once a day, I mean, they're getting an average of 1,000 a day. Most of them are coming in groups of between 100 and 300. So, this is organized, it is orchestrated, it is tactical. The cartels are clearly, they're coaching the aliens on what to say. They're handing out sheets of printed paper to tell them, talk about gang violence, talk about being scared to live in your home country. There's no question, first of all, that Barack Obama and his policies invited this. They set the stage. Whether they knew what the full ramifications would be, I don't know. Wouldn't surprise me, but they set the stage. But now the entire process has been taken over by the cartels, who are driving it, orchestrating it, and using it tactically to do whatever they want. And they are. So that's the position we're in, and I can guarantee you three points to conclude. A, it's not a humanitarian crisis, and it is most certainly not a refugee crisis. These are not refugees. There's a legal definition for a refugee. It does not apply here. So, we don't need the extra kind of sympathy implications that that word carries, so let's not use it. This is an invasion. The only way to stop this at this point is to start deporting mass numbers of illegal aliens who are coming across. Mass numbers, not just one here, one there. Large numbers. Because every community in Central America from which they're being sent is watching. And Joe Biden going to Guatemala and saying, it's really not safe for you to come, and by the way, if you do come, here's how you apply for asylum, is not helpful. The only thing that will stop this is deportations. And because that's not going to happen in the near future, expect the numbers to continue to grow, expect the border to be far less secure than it's been in decades, and expect some kind of epidemic somewhere in the country, because it's going to happen. And I'll leave it
Rosemary,
there.
thank you very much. I was hanging out for the happy news, and it seemed to get away from me. Can I just start off with a question about Mexico? You sort of touched on what is happening on the immediate other side of the border. Two things that keep cropping up in the reporting that I'm seeing, or the messaging that I'm hearing from you more often than the reporting. One is that the Mexicans have among the most rigorous border and immigration policies in the world. So these large numbers of people who are transiting their country and who are forming up and being tactically guided from that side of the border to this are obviously benefiting from, at the very least, a look the other way kind of policy, if not actual enabling by the government of Mexico, not just their home countries. That's one question. And the second is, I keep hearing about Mexican military units coming across the border as well, and in some cases in numbers. So would you talk about what's up with that, and what are we doing, if anything, or could we do about Mexico?
Well, there's no question, when you have over 100,000 people in the first 6 months of this year, every one of whom crossed through Mexico 1,000 miles to get here, most of them apparently are climbing on to the tops of freight trains and holding on with their small children. Great parental practice. There's absolutely no way that the Mexican government doesn't know this. It's ludicrous to think that that's even possible. We also know from the aliens themselves that they're paying Mexican law enforcement along the way, bribes, which are being demanded of them. The immigration policy of Mexico is one of the strictest policies in the world. I mean, any of you want to move to Mexico permanently, forget about it. You're not going to move there. You're not going to get a job there. You can go there as a tourist and you can spend your money. You can't buy property along the coast. There are all kinds of restrictions. When Mexico wants to, it is very, very good at controlling its southern border with its military. And it's not, unarmed soldiers. It's fully armed soldiers with shoot-to-kill orders. So there's no question of Mexican complicity. In terms of the Mexican army or military incursions into the United States, it happens far more often than most Americans think. There are clear instances where Mexican military units have actually escorted drug loads into the United States. And I guess last night there was an incident where a Mexican helicopter flew over the border, shot at 2 Border Patrol agents, flew back, and called up to apologize. I don't know what the excuse for that is, Oh, we thought they were Mexicans? I mean, really? So you just shot at them? Anyway, yeah, so what could we do about it? There are so many things we could do about it. Stop giving money to Mexico. Stop the remittances to Mexico. Send all of these people back to Mexico, which let them through. There are a variety of options, none of which, apparently, we are willing to consider in this country. And unfortunately, the fact that the Senate is controlled by Democrats seems to be bleeding the courage right out of House Republicans.
And can I ask one other question on this? There is, as I understand it, something on the books now in terms of laws that prohibit us from simply deporting Central Americans back to their home countries without some sort of deportation hearings, proceedings, and so on, which is where these permisos come in. Is that right?
Yes.
Where did that come into the statute books?
Thank you, Senator Dianne Feinstein, for that little nugget of wonderful policy. This was like a pet of hers, the Unaccompanied Alien Child Protection Act, starting in 2002. It's been modified a couple times, but basically we have negotiated agreements with Canada and Mexico to immediately just turn people around when they come in illegally and we catch them. But with non-contiguous countries, the law requires that DHS turn over to Health and Human Services, the Office of Refugee Resettlement, within 72 hours, any unaccompanied minor, at which point they are to be farmed out as quickly as possible to a relative or friend in the United States, even if that relative is here illegally. And by the way, most of these children, this whole fleeing violence thing is absurd because in most of these cases, the parents abandon the child in Central America to fend for themselves against the violence, dumped them with a relative, came up to the United States illegally to work, and are now sending for the children because of Obama's failure to enforce the laws and the idea that they will get to stay, which of course they will. Let's face it. As long as Obama is in power, they will stay. But I don't even know where I was going with that. Where was I going with that, Frank?
Well, the Dianne Feinstein.
Oh, Feinstein. So once HHS gets them, farms them out, then they have to go before an immigration judge, which is an administrative judge, not an Article III court. So basically, political. And they're all being provided lawyers now, despite the fact that the law says that they cannot be provided government-funded lawyers. So they are claiming asylum, and this is on the coaching sheet that the smugglers are handing out, based on fear of violence and gangs and so on at home, which is actually not a ground for asylum in a sane world. They are applying for special immigrant juvenile visas, which is a green card, permanent residence right off the bat, if they can claim that one or both parents abandoned them, which is why most of the family units showing up on the border only have one parent, because then they claim that the other one abandoned them. They are also claiming, all kinds of delays, technical delays in the court process and so on. But it's a years-long process. Of all of the unaccompanied children who came in the last 5 years, 87% of them are still in the United States waiting for their first court date.
Wow. Any other questions on this? How did I know you would have one?
Thank you so much. Really appreciate your presentation. Can you verify, I'm hearing that a majority of the UACs are actually teenage males hovering between the ages of 14 and 18. assuming that 18-year-old really is 18 and not really 25.
Right. Yeah, the 80% are male, and 83%, or I could have that backwards, but 83% are 15, 16, or 17, if not older. So yeah, I mean, and these are the ones who are covered from head to toe in gang tats.
Rosemary, can I ask one other question? You mentioned this Office of Refugee Resettlement. Can you talk about the cottage industry that has developed in this country in terms of bringing in people who claim, in some cases, they're in this, excuse me, in this case, perhaps Central Americans, but in other cases, they're refugees because the UN says they're refugees, and we wind up having to take a portion of them, and what happens to them then? But
Yeah.
how that sort of industry is operating in this whole story?
This is actually a good part of the reason to answer Dr. Gorka's question as to where are the churches on Iraq. They're really, really busy lobbying for more money through the refugee resettlement program to make money on resettling refugees in the United States, refugees from Syria, refugees from Iraq, Somalia. And by the way, Somalis have actually been caught with the family units along the border trying to flee from the big groups. So it's not just Central Americans or Mexicans. So yeah, the religious organizations, Catholic Conference is a big one, the Lutheran Refugee Services, Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, you know, there are all these religious groups that get paid massive amounts of money by the federal government, our money, to supposedly resettle and take care of refugees. And what they do is bring them to a community, give them food and find them housing, and supposedly job employment assistance for 8 months, and then they disappear. And it's all up to the community to pay the rest of the resources that they need. And they generally, there's, you know, very, very high welfare use, very high unemployment, very low education levels, of course, in these populations. But the religious groups are making it's a great deal for them. And they lobby for more and more refugees, and they take care of both refugees and unaccompanied alien children. So this is a big bonus for them.
Have you heard the rumor that La Raza is involved in encouraging this?
I have. There are, would it surprise me if La Raza was talking to Hispanic media and saying, you know, well, I mean, I don't know why anyone wouldn't come in now. Is La Raza actually funding mass transportation or something like that? I doubt it. Very, very possibly. You know, I mean, you know, the fact that the numbers have skyrocketed, you know, it's been growing for at least 2 years. But in the last 6 months, something changed, whether it's because the smugglers realized what a potential, you know, huge pile of cash this is, or whether it's outside groups getting involved. I mean, we know that the Catholic Church, a priest from the Catholic Conference bishop testified on Wednesday that they have been very involved in Central America, primarily Honduras. What are they telling people? Who knows?
Well, especially if they're making money on the refugees on this end.
It's a cash cow.
It's a pipeline. Erin, one more.
Okay, very quick. I can offer up a comment. Speaking with Christian groups, I mean, I used to go down into Mexico and monitor the smuggling route, so yes, I can testify and verify. The Mexican government has federales on every single road, everywhere in Mexico, whether it's going east, west, north, or south, so they're part of this. But so are the Christian groups, because Father Rene used to brag about moving immigrants across 16,000 a month. Okay, but my main question for you, and one more thing regarding the Christian groups, down in Central America, recognizing the availability of the DACA and all of this, the Christian groups down in Central America are actually, instead of staying there and monitoring to the poor groups down in Central America, are now telling them, go ahead and go on north, and we can help you up there. It'll be easier. okay? Quicker, better, faster. But my question actually is, since we know this administration isn't going to do anything except maybe facilitate this, what about the border states? Are there states, governors, other than Texas, rising up the Office of Public Safety?
Department.
Yeah, Department of Public Safety. I mean, I know how the people are on the border states who are about ready to go through the roof here. And
Yeah,
we're just
no, and
looking for somebody to lead. And
The ranchers are coming out in force, and there's militia groups going to the border right now. So, you know, anybody who wants to stop this from escalating needs to get on board right now, because it's escalating.
Okay,
You know,
well-
and this is, you know, okay, so Texas sent out the Department of Public Safety.
Yeah.
Big deal. Where's the National Guard?
Exactly.
You know, why didn't
question-
Rick Perry send the National Guard? Why didn't Jan Brewer send the National Guard? I can't answer. I mean, if only I were governor.
Well, it's obviously one of the things that, as sort of national security-minded folks, we can be, I think, encouraging and should. Rosemary, I guess if there were some good news in all of this, it would appear to be that the idea against this horrific backdrop that comprehensive immigration reform is going to happen in the Congress this year is diminished. Do you think it's done, or do you think that we still face a risk of a lame duck session?
I'm going to use your word and say the risk has diminished. But come the lame duck, I'm not closing my eyes.
Yeah, okay. Anybody else? If not, Rosemary, thank you for the super work you do at Numbers, and thank you for joining us as always.